Sup, you beautiful bastards? Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show. It is Monday, February 1st, 2021. Hit that like button, otherwise I will punch you in the throat. And let's just jump into the news of the day so you can get back to yours. Where we'll start today is with entertainment/entertainer news, starting with CorpseHusband. So for those unfamiliar, in addition to Corpse just being a massive internet personality where he can trend on Twitter just for releasing audio of himself breathing, and you have a lot of people learning about him due to his super successful gaming videos, he's also actually a musician. He creates original music. His song E-Girls Ruined My Life just on YouTube has over 30 million views, but he actually popped up in the news over the last 24 hours because of Spotify. With Corpse posting and now deleted tweets, it's completely all you guys, always. Thank you so much. Reportedly showing just 1% of his Spotify plays coming from the platform's official editorial playlists. Further explaining, to clarify, a lot of bigger artists get a good amount of their plays from big Spotify editorial playlists, which is what Spotify's editorial team pushes to large amounts of people. Labels get their artists on there, etc. I never get on them, and 1% of my plays is from them. All you. Also, interestingly with this, the same day that he posted this, the song Agoraphobic popped into the global and US Viral 50 playlist. But, with all this, Corpse hits on something that has been kind of a long talked about issue. With a change in the music industry that we've seen over the last 5, 10, 15 years, one of the biggest things has been small creators that aren't backed by anyone. They can upload stuff in a lot of different places, blow up. And so you have some people saying, the gatekeepers of old are gone, but you have others saying, well, the gatekeepers just changed. Well, there are a number of players in the space. I mean, if you look to Spotify, it's kind of been understood that playlists have a lot of power. Right? You've even had economists putting out working papers noting that if you get into certain playlists, something like today's top hits, you're talking about tens of millions of extra streams, which of course is huge for an artist getting awareness in front of new eyes, but also money. And hell, I need to see if they're still doing this, if it's become more standard, but this news today is coming just a few months after it was reported that Spotify was announcing a controversial experimental feature, one that would notably allow artists to get an algorithmic boost on the company's playlist if they took a smaller cut of royalties for the songs promoted. It's why at that time we saw the American Union of Musicians and Allied Workers saying, Spotify encourages labels and management companies to pay for plays on the platform. In many cases, the artists do not even know this is happening. Right, and understand that's kind of the darker, more controversial part of this story, and then of course there's just the general gatekeeping that can still happen to this day with playlists. So I guess kind of where this story ends for me, one, I think if anything, this might actually be beneficial for CorpseHusband, though I do wonder why he deleted the tweet. The level of success he has gotten to despite not being on those playlists, I think is a fantastic element to his story. But then also secondly, I am incredibly interested to see what happens in this music space in the coming years. And then let's talk about this morning. Actress Evan Rachel Wood wrote a post naming Marilyn Manson as her abuser, detailing her experiences, writing on Instagram, "The name of my abuser is Brian Warner, also known to the world as Marilyn Manson." Going on to say that he groomed her, horrifically abused her for years, writing, "I was brainwashed and manipulated into submission," but adding, "I am done living in fear of retaliation, slander, or blackmail. I am here to expose this dangerous man and call out the many industries that have enabled him before he ruins any more lives. I stand with the many victims who will no longer be silent." And while Wood is naming and specifically talking about Manson here, it should also be noted that she's been very vocal about her experiences as a survivor of domestic violence for a number of years. In fact, back in 2018, she testified before a House Judiciary Subcommittee in an effort to pass the Sexual Assault Survivors Bill of Rights in all 50 states. Also in 2019, she testified in California to promote legislation to promote the Phoenix Act, which alters the statute of limitations for crimes involving domestic violence. But back to the story in the post this morning, following that, it resulted in 4 other women detailing their experiences with Manson, which notably involved similar allegations. Those women, Ashley Lindsay Morgan, Sarah McNeely, Ashley Walters, and another woman by the name of Gabriella, detailing various forms of abuse. McNeely saying that she was emotionally abused, terrorized, and scarred, and locked in rooms when she was, quote, bad. So far, Manson's reps have not responded to these specific claims, but ultimately that is where we are right now in this developing situation. It started with Evan Rachel Wood this morning, now has become even larger. Then there's the question of how does Manson, his team, and those around him respond. As we were finishing up today's show, we saw reports that he was dropped by his record label, Loma Vista, with the company releasing a statement saying, "In light of today's disturbing allegations by Evan Rachel Wood and other women naming Marilyn Manson as their abuser, Loma Vista will cease to further promote his current album effective immediately. Due to these concerning developments, we have also decided not to work with Marilyn Manson on any future projects." And so that's why for now, we have to wait and see. And then let's talk about a story. It's business news, but then it also leads into a sponsorship. And the only reason I'm doing it today is it feels like the only way to actually get from point A to point B. So last Thursday, I, along with many other people, were furious with Robinhood. Their actions and abysmal communication around them is part of the reason I announced I'm never going to do a sponsorship with them ever again, and I'm personally moving my money off of that platform. And I was nowhere near the only person with issues with Robinhood here, whether it be everyday people as well as other big personalities like Joe Rogan.
Robinhood is supposed to be steal from the rich, give to the poor. That's the story of Robinhood. Instead, they are protecting all these hedge fund people by stopping people from doing this.
I mean, it really became the story of the week. And then so for my show specifically, you had people saying, well, where are you moving to? And I now have an answer for that. Public, and more specifically, publicdefranco.com. Last week was unprecedented, but whenever you have those stress tests, that's when you really see what a person or a company is about. And with Public specifically, I appreciated their stance and their communication last week as they made clear that they didn't agree with the clearinghouse decision, and they felt like they were actually fighting for the little guy. I also got to speak to their co-CEO, Leif Abraham, who got me really excited about the app, where it's going, as well as their dedication to the customers, especially around communication and transparency. And so that brings me to the sponsor aspect of this. If you'd like to join me in moving your portfolio or whatever you have over, it is actually surprisingly easy, or you're just looking to get started for the first time. Use my link, publicdefranco.com, or just click that top link in the description down below. I get paid because I know I sent you, and you get a free stock. It is the definition of a win-win. Public also does really cool stuff like they make the stock market social. Like in addition to the app having 0 commission fees on standard trades, there's actually a social community of investors on there. I'm following people to learn new stuff and communicating with people via the feed, and overall, so far, I'm loving the social part of using Public. And so by combining great features like fractional investing in both a social and an educational community, Public makes it possible to learn and build your investing confidence at your own pace. And fractional investing, if you don't know, it allows you to buy stocks in small slices so that you can actually own a greater variety of stocks. Right? I mean, you can start small, invest $1, $5, $50 or more, and own fractions of all the companies that you love. And there's a lot more, but I don't want to spend more time in this video just gushing about them. But main point, I'm incredibly excited about Public. And so if you want to move over like I am, or you just want to start an account you've never jumped in before, head on over to publicdefranco.com and receive a free stock once you open an account. Then, in international news, let's look to Russia, where reportedly 5,100 people were detained yesterday while protesting the arrest of opposition leader Alexei Navalny. This reportedly including 80 journalists, and while most people were later released, many people have also accused Russian police of beating protesters. And this is an extremely notable moment because these are the largest protests Russia has seen in years, which is why we've seen an unprecedented number of riot police locking down the city center of Moscow now, stopping people to check their documents, asking them where they're headed. As far as the international response, the United States has condemned the crackdown, even urging Russia to release Navalny, with Secretary of State Antony Blinken saying on Twitter, the US condemns the persistent use of harsh tactics against peaceful protesters and journalists by Russian authorities for a second week straight. Though, unsurprisingly, the Russian government has rejected that call, denouncing what they've referred to as a crude interference in Russia's internal affairs, but also accusing the United States of trying to destabilize the situation by backing protesters. Protesters that we will likely see in the streets again, especially because you have Navalny's team calling for additional protests tomorrow in Moscow, which is the same day that he's set to face a court hearing that will decide whether or not he'll spend years in prison. Then, in other international news, we should talk about Myanmar's military launching a full-blown coup and detaining senior politicians, this including the country's civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi. And as far as what we know right now, in an announcement read on a military-run TV station, officials said that they had seized power, installed the army's chief as the country's new leader, and implemented a year-long state of emergency. Now with this, you had Suu Kyi's spokesperson as well as many international observers saying this is an illegal military coup, but we've seen military officials pushing back, saying their actions are legally justified under a section of the Constitution that they wrote that allows them to take power in times of national emergency, with them claiming that this move was necessary because the government had not acted on the military's claims of fraud in November's election, and also claiming they did this because the government had allowed the election to go ahead despite the pandemic. Now, as far as what happened in the election, which was widely viewed as a referendum on Suu Kyi's leadership, her party actually won 396 out of the 476 seats in parliament. And so with those huge results, you had the military's proxy party, which only won 33 seats, claiming that there had been discrepancies like duplicated names on voting lists. And while they didn't say that those irregularities were big enough to have changed the election outcome, they still argued that the election must be held again. Now, as far as what happens next, you have the military claiming that they will oversee what they call free and fair multi-party elections once the year-long state of emergency is over. But many experts are skeptical for two main reasons. First of all, the military's takeover of authority will prolong the power of the army chief, who was supposed to age out of his role this summer. So now he has this incentive to stay in power, especially because his network of lucrative family businesses could have been hurt by his retirement. And secondly, the last time the country had a military coup was back in 1962, and that resulted in the military holding power for nearly 5 decades until 2011. And there, when they finally agreed to a transition, that eventually led to Suu Kyi becoming the de facto leader in 2015. Now, at that time, the country had been celebrated as a rare example where military generals actually gave power to civilians. And Suu Kyi, who is also a Nobel laureate, was applauded as an international champion of human rights for her campaign against the military junta. But also in recent years, she has lost a lot of international credibility and support because she's become one of the military's biggest public defenders, even going as far to defend the brutal crackdown of Rohingya Muslims, which has been labeled a genocide by the UN. And so now many experts say they see this takeover as a confirmation that the military has held and holds ultimate power despite the claims of democracy, with many saying this coup is just a pretext for them to reinstate their full influence. Also, with this news, it will be an interesting test for the Biden administration. Notably, the United States already has some sanctions in place on generals who have been implicated in the violence against the Rohingya. This, interestingly enough, including the country's newly installed military leader. And as far as what could come, I mean, we're already seeing Biden threatening even more sanctions, issuing a statement this morning where he called the coup a direct assault on the country's transition to democracy and the rule of law. Then, in U.S. political news, we should talk about the 10 Republican senators meeting with President Biden today to push a much smaller version of the $1.9 trillion stimulus package proposal. The largely centrist group, led by Senator Susan Collins, is hoping to get Biden to sign onto a $618 billion plan, which may sound like a lot of money until you remember it is just a third of what Biden has asked for. Among other things, this plan from Republicans would extend the $300 a week in federal unemployment benefits until June, rather than increasing them to $400 and extending them until September. It would also send stimulus checks worth just $1,000 rather than the $1,400 that Biden wants, and it would start phasing out direct payments for Americans who make $40,000 a year instead of $75,000. It also has $20 billion in funding for K-12 schools, which is a major drop from the $130 billion that Biden has proposed. And while yes, the Republican plan does match Biden's request of $160 billion for vaccines, testing, and other healthcare-related funding, it does not include any money to state and local governments, nor does it raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. And so at this point, you might be wondering, well, why is this counteroffer even significant? The Democrats have the House, they effectively have the Senate, thanks to Kamala Harris being able to split a tie vote in a Senate that is split 50-50. Well, the reason is you have these 10 Republicans billing their proposal as a way for Biden to, yes, approve much-needed pandemic aid, while also fulfilling his inaugural pledge to unite the country. Essentially trying to pitch this as, okay, Biden, will you actually work with people across the aisle? Also, from a strategic standpoint, 10 GOP senators is a key thing, because that means that if all 50 Senate Dems were to vote for this plan, it would overcome the 60-vote filibuster rule. But many Democrats have already signaled that they will not support this much smaller of a bill. And it appears that includes Biden himself. I mean, just this morning we saw Press Secretary Jen Psaki downplaying expectations for the meeting, saying that Biden would not agree to a deal without further negotiations, and adding, the risk is not that it is too big, this package. The risk is that it is too small. That remains his view. Right at this point, the stimulus already feels too late, and now you want to make it too little? Or, as incoming Senate Finance Chairman Ron Wyden said today, the package outlined by 10 Senate Republicans is far too small to provide the relief the American people need. In particular, a 3-month extension of jobless benefits is a non-starter. Many states still have not gotten benefits out the door after Donald Trump's tantrum in December caused them to lapse, or facing another cliff in just 6 weeks. We can't keep jumping from cliff to cliff every few months. Workers who have lost their jobs through no fault of their own shouldn't be constantly worrying that they are going to lose their income overnight. An extension of benefits for at least 6 months is essential. Meanwhile, with this whole situation, we've seen House Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying Thursday that she will move Biden's plan forward this week with or without Republican backing through a process known as budget reconciliation, which is incredibly notable because that would allow the Senate to agree to this package with a simple majority instead of the 60 normally required for major bills. And then let's talk about and kind of just prepare you for some of the insanity that we are going to see next week. And in particular here, I'm talking about with over a week to go before his impeachment hearing, former President Trump announced yesterday that he was hiring 2 new attorneys to head his defense. And that news coming out after it was reported that Trump's entire 5-person legal team abruptly parted ways with him over the weekend, with Trump spokesman Jason Miller confirming that South Carolina lawyer Carl Butch Bowers, who Trump had tapped to lead the team, would no longer be representing him. Miller also saying a deputy Bowers had chosen had left as well, but said that the others rumored to have departed were never officially named as part of the team. And as far as why the lawyers left, sources close to the Matter told reporters that it was because Trump wanted them to argue that he had actually won the election, right? And to continue to promote his baseless claims that the election had been rigged. But according to those sources, the lawyers felt uncomfortable pushing this misinformation and instead wanted to go in on the argument that it was unconstitutional to remove a president who has already left office. A move that from a strategic standpoint just makes sense, that the Republicans have already set the field here. Right? Remember, all but 5 Republican senators backed a resolution supporting the very same argument in a key test last week. But still, despite the fact that the GOP has gone out of its way to say, hey, here's the door, here's the solution. Maybe let's not continue to fuel lies that led to an insurrection. Despite all of that, he reportedly wants this different defense. Though, as far as Miller, he confirmed to reporters that the decision to part ways was mutual, but he also rejected the idea that Trump wants to focus the trial on election fraud, calling those numerous reports fake news. Which, I think those words would mean something to me if we didn't have just a treasure trove of evidence of things that are contrary to what Donald Trump has called fake news in the past. Also, regarding the 2 lawyers that Trump announced yesterday, they are quite controversial. One of the lawyers, Bruce Castor, was widely condemned for declining to prosecute Bill Cosby during his time as Pennsylvania District Attorney. And then the other lawyer, David Schoen, he's best known for defending Roger Stone and for meeting with Donald Trump's old party buddy, Jeffrey Epstein, to discuss representing him a few days before his death. But yeah, main point. Little over a week, prepare yourselves. Whether it be this story or anything else I covered today, I would love to know your thoughts in those comments down below, because this is the end of the video. As always, thanks for being a part of my daily dives in the news here. I love your face. Thanks for subscribing. And as always, this has been news that matters for people that care. I'll see you tomorrow.